Hi, this is Michael Buffer, and welcome to the BoxHard Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Mikey Garcia.
Yo, it's your boy, the odd guy himself, Malik King Scott.
Hi, I'm Charlie Edwards.
This is Fast Eddie Chambers, and you're listening to the BoxHard Podcast with my main man, Joey Coastman.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 172 of the BoxHard Podcast. I'm your host Joey Coastman. I'm joined as always by the ever elusive, the ever infamous Mr. Ayaz Sumra. Ayaz battling a bit of an illness at the moment. How you doing?
I'm good, Joey. Yourself?
Very good, my friend, very good. Right, let's get straight down to it. Let's start with the review part of the show. We're going to start at the Gymnase La Salamandra in a place I'm not even going to try to pronounce in France. We saw Even Mendy, 40-5 with one draw, take on Achiko Odikadze, who was 20-10 with one draw. That was a 6th round TKO there for Even Mendy. 41 wins he has now. A bit of a meaningless fight, if I'm being honest. Moving out now to Germany, though, at another venue I'm not even going to try to pronounce. We saw Vincent Feigenbutz. He moved to 30 wins. He's got 2 losses. It was the vacant GBU World Super-Middleweight title at stake. It was vacant, like I say. He took on the Polish Przemysław Opalach, 27-2, a win there in the 5th round, a TKO there for Feigenbutz. That's it for Germany. Moving out now to the United States at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut, USA. Over here we saw Cletus Seldin pick up win number 23, a knockout in the first round against Adam Mate, who's now 28-14. A good win there for Seldin, but once again he doesn't really learn much from it. A first round knockout, he seems to get a few of those early knockouts, and when the fight goes after a few rounds, he seems to struggle and run out of ideas. We saw that against Eubank Jr. Moving out now to the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, USA. Starting with the undercard, a big upset here. Marcellus Wilder, he was looking to move to 4 professional wins, but it wasn't to be. In the 4th round and the final round, he was TKO'd by William Dietz, who has a record now of 7-12. So a bit of a journeyman, really. He was 6-12 going in, and he's upset Marcellus Wilder, of course, the younger brother of Deontay. Marcellus Wilder was actually scheduled to be on that card over here, the Eubank Jr. and James DeGale undercard. He was also on that, with the likes of Joe Joyce and the rest of it, so it doesn't look like he'll be on that date. Just goes to show what happens if you take your eye off the prize even for 1 minute in this boxing game. Gary Antoine Russell fought on the bill, the younger brother of Gary Russell Jr. He moved to 8-0, a TKO in the 2nd round against Roberto Almazan, who is now 7-9. He was down in the 1st and 2nd round, Almazan. Also on the bill, we saw Adam Kownacki. It was supposed to be a good fight, but a brilliant win it ended up being for Kownacki. He's now 19-0, a TKO in the 2nd round against Gerald Washington, 19-2 with one draw, now 19-3 with one draw. Washington was down in that 2nd round before being stopped. It was shocking, actually. The first round, it was an awful start for Gerald Washington. He got stunned multiple times. He was badly hurt at the end of the round. He seemed to have no answer for Kownacki's looping shots. He was being tagged way too often, and Washington's defense was awful. He had to show way more of his chin than he should have had to show in that first round there. There was no jab from him. His measure of distance was terrible, and it was great work from Kownacki. You can't take nothing away from him. He did what he had to do, but he did pick up a cut as well late on in the first round. It was hard to see what caused the cut. Then in the 2nd round, Washington actually came out with a nice combination to start the round, but he seemed to punch himself out in a desperate attempt to hurt Kownacki. He was unable to hurt Kownacki, and he ended up walking onto one himself, and from there Kownacki was able to drop Gerald Washington. Washington did bravely get back up, and arguably he shouldn't have been allowed to carry on, but he did get allowed to carry on, and he was stopped within about 5 seconds. To be fair, the referee did a good job. when I think about it. But yeah, he was stopped on his feet, and he did start boxing late in his career, we know that. And unfortunately, I think Gerald Washington has found his level, and he's always played sports at a high level, and perhaps his body's just a bit too old to compete with these top contender type guys. I mean, he's in his late 30s, Gerald Washington, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I went with him to win on points. That was my prediction last week. Ayaz also went with that prediction. And you, the listeners, got it right. You picked a knockout for Kownacki, so a point there for you guys. Moving up the bill once again, we saw Keith Thurman, 28-0, return to the ring after a 22-month hiatus. He took on Josecito Lopez, 36-7, for Keith Thurman's WBA Super-World welterweight title. Lopez himself was down in the second round. That was a bit of a shock. But going through the fight itself, well, it was a fight of a lot of drama, if we're being completely honest. It wasn't necessarily the Keith Thurman that we expected to see. It was a lot more a lot more dangerous than we expected it would be. But the actual fight itself, going through it round by round, the first round was a great opening round for Thurman. He didn't appear to be ring rusty at all. He seemed to still have his sharp reflexes. The speed was evident. He wasn't missing his swagger. That was the thing about Keith Thurman before he went on this hiatus. He had that swagger about him. Everything flowed nicely. He looked good, and it was the same thing again from him in that first round there. He looked like he hadn't been out the ring for such a long time. In the second round, the movement from Thurman was great. The elusiveness was something that started to frustrate Lopez. And then in the last 30 seconds of the round, the pair exchanged left hooks and down went Lopez. Like I say, he walked into the shot. When he got back up, Thurman did try and finish him, but there wasn't really enough time left in the round. So yeah, that was a good start, like I say, for Thurman. In the third round, once again, it just looked like the old classic Keith Thurman. It looked like he's back. He's still young. He's not an old guy. People sometimes forget that. But coming off that much of a layoff, you wouldn't have known he was coming off that layoff. Looking at his performance at that point, he looked like his usual self. In the fourth round, once again, another good round for Thurman. His movement was beautiful. He glided around the ring. He did get caught with a massive left hook, but it didn't seem to bother him at all. It was a bit of a wake-up call, because prior to that, like I say, he was in so much control that he probably didn't even feel like he was in a fight. In the fifth round, I gave it to Thurman once again. In the sixth round, that was the first round where I actually gave it to Lopez. He brought it to Thurman there. He had a few big moments, but nothing too serious. Yeah, I felt like he deserved that round just by a little bit there, just by a margin. In the seventh round, it was a shocking round. That was where Thurman got nailed repeatedly, and his legs were gone at one point. Well, I say one point, for much of the round. He looked on the verge of being stopped many times, and it was unclear what happened. His head was getting knocked back by left and right hands. Josecito went for broke when he saw Keith Thurman hurt, and Thurman had to get on his bike. I mean, he looked terrible. It was scary. Lopez was hitting Thurman with thudding shots. The commentator even gave it a 10-8 round to Josecito Lopez. Thurman did actually land one or two big shots himself in the dying seconds of the round, but it was a big round for Lopez. There's no denying that. In the eighth round, Thurman got back to his boxing. The commentators said that perhaps Thurman might be a one-handed fighter because he didn't let his right hand go too often, but obviously Thurman was out the ring for 22 months due to an injury with his left shoulder, so a problem with his right hand would be really bad. But I personally thought it was more of just smart boxing. He didn't really want to engage after being hurt in the earlier round, so he was sticking his jab out and he was moving, perhaps just further recuperating from any damage that he may have taken in that earlier round, just clearing his head a bit. I did give Thurman the round, but the commentary team gave it to Lopez. I wasn't sure about that. The dominance wasn't there, though, for Thurman like it had been in the earlier rounds. Lopez seemed to have a few decent rounds in a row. In the ninth round, it was a better round for Thurman. In that round, he did let his right hand go, but it was hard to see if he threw it with mean intentions or not, because Lopez was taking his right hand without many issues. In the 10th round, once again, I gave it to Thurman. I guess when you look at it, even though he still looked his sharp self, it's not surprising that he faded a little bit towards the end. It doesn't matter how many rounds of sparring you do, of course. There's nothing quite like a real fight for 12 rounds in front of a packed crowd, and he did seem to tire. The 11th round was a close round. It really could have gone either way. The ring generalship was with Thurman, but the sheer effort came from Lopez. And then in the 12th and final round, Thurman came out and finished strong. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy. He did take some big shots once again in that round, but looking back at it, Lopez has got such a relentless style. I mean, he didn't take a backward step all night, and obviously it's a very risky style to come back off that big layoff and fight someone like that. So it was a tough comeback opponent. Credit to Keith. You can't really judge how good he is at his best on that performance. Yes, probably Spence or Crawford would have gotten Lopez out of there, but let's cut Furman some slack here. Obviously, I'm a big fan of his, but it was a big layoff. There are big fights for him down the line, and probably he's going to need one more fight before a potential Porter rematch, because Porter is relentless as hell too, and there could be some real risks going into that fight. But other than that, we need to remember that this man's got the best wins at 147. No one else out there has fought Porter and Garcia back to back. He took Garcia as he beat Porter, and for me, he needs to be given major credit. Like I say, a real tough comeback opponent there for him, and he got through it by any means necessary, really, and it was exciting along the way. It was dangerous, but he passed the test, and for me, it was by flying colours. There were a few weird scorecards. For me, I had it wide to Furman, but there was one or two. I think one of the judges, even had it. It was a majority decision. So one judge had it a draw. I couldn't see that, but a majority decision over 12 rounds in favour of Keith Furman. Now 29-0. He called out Manny Pacquiao. That's a fight I'd like to see. Moving out now to the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas. This is the final bill to mention. It happened in the USA. Unfortunately, I didn't watch the bill, so forgive me on that, because I've heard that the main event was absolutely brilliant. But let's start with the undercard here. Virgil Ortiz Jr. moved to 12-0. He made his opponent retire on his store after 5 rounds. His opponent, Jesus Barrayan, now 23-5 with 1 draw. Also on the bill, Jesus Rojas, 26-2 with 2 draws, put his WBA World Featherweight title on the line against China's Can Xu, who's now 16-2, and he became the new champion there. So a unanimous decision over 12 rounds for Can Xu. Once again, I haven't seen the fight. Ayaz was supposed to be watching it, but I'm not quite sure what happened with his TV or his stream. Any comment on that, Ayaz? No comment on that. Okay. Well, anyway, it was supposed to be Ayaz's job to cover that one, and he's let us down there. But also the main event here, Jaime Munguia, he moved to 32-0, and he successfully defended his WBO World Super Welterweight title against Takeshi Inoue, who's now 13-1 with 1 draw. He was undefeated going in. To be honest, no one really gave him much credit. No one gave him much of a chance, to be honest, and he was a lot tougher than what we all expected. He is a warrior. He's a tough guy. Not many people seem to go the distance with Munguia, and he gave Munguia a lot of trouble from what I've heard, and the judges' scorecards were apparently way too wide. It was quite disgraceful from what I've read. But of course, Inoue can come again. Imagine him against the likes of Liam Smith, perhaps. I haven't actually seen the fight, like I say, but I'd imagine that'd be a war. But yeah, that's really about it. I just want to go over the predictions once again. I went with Munguia by knockout. That didn't happen. So did the listeners, and so did Ayaz. We all went with Munguia by knockout, of course, and he won on points, so no point gathered there. Keith Furman by knockout, I went with. Ayaz went with Furman on points, and the listeners went with Furman by knockout. So, just Ayaz gaining a point there. And then, of course, we mentioned earlier Washington on points, myself and Ayaz went with, but you, the listeners, went with Kownacki by knockout. So no points for me last week, just 1 point for Ayaz and 1 point for the listeners. So excellent stuff there. You've been on good form recently, Ayaz. Last week, of course, winning the prediction league pretty much for that weekend, and then this week you've tied 1-1 with the listeners, so you're raking it back in. And me, I'm flying in the lead on points, but I can't afford to take my foot off the gas because it is the first to 100. And I think I'm about 4 points clear now. I'll total it up at the very end of the show. But that is it for the review part. Just before we wrap up part 1, the last thing to do is to welcome our very first guest. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the former IBF Super-Middleweight World Champion. It is, of course, Mr. Caleb Truax. Caleb, welcome back on the show.
Good to be back.
Great to have you back. So, Caleb, of course, you're the former IBF World Champion. On last week's show, we had Caleb, the new IBF World Champion. You guys are friends, though, right?
I wouldn't call us friends. We've had some words over social media before, but we've met in person and seemed to have ironed that out a little bit. You know, I shook his hand, he shook my hand, and went our separate ways.
Okay, because I just remember him being there and shouting a few things out for the DeGale rematch for you. I think he was kind of there supporting you, if I'm not mistaken. I know he had a few words with James. So I was
he was trying to get at me, and James stepped in and went crazy on him. So it definitely wasn't in support of me.
Oh, wow. Okay, I completely got that wrong. I was going to ask if we would ever possibly see Caleb versus Caleb. It seems like we can't rule that one out. It could be a potential fight.
Yeah, you know, I'm looking forward to my fight April 13th with Peter Quillin, and not looking past that. But this, I believe, it will be either an IBF or a WBC eliminator. It hasn't been made official yet, but it's going to be an eliminator for one of those two belts. And if it's IBF, you know, it's a good chance I could fight Caleb Plant. If it's a WBC eliminator, whoever wins the Durrell versus I can't pronounce his name, the guy from Turkey, Yildirim. Yeah, they're fighting actually here in Minneapolis, in my hometown, in a few weeks at the Minneapolis Armory, the same place where my fight will be located. So I'll be at that fight, watching very closely.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So we last spoke back in August, right before your last fight. You obviously went on to TKO Fabiano Suarez in 3 rounds. What was that like? I mean, like motivational-wise, after fighting DeGale twice back-to-back, was it hard getting up for a lower-level guy like this guy? You know,
I'm usually a guy that gets up for everything, but after fighting for 2 world titles, you know, back to back against DeGale, it was a little bit difficult to get up and be at my best for that fight. I did, you know, obviously I trained hard, and my team did a really good job of staying on top of me and just letting me know every single day that, hey man, you can't take anybody lightly. If you lose to this guy, then your career is derailed. So I took it very seriously, and I'm thankful that I had my team there to really reinforce the fact that I can't take it lightly. I have to be up like I am for a world title fight, you know.
Well said. Yeah, a good win, like I say, in just 3 rounds. And moving on to what's next for you, you mentioned there, April 13th in Minnesota, you'll be squaring off against former WBO world champion Peter Quillin. Now, this is a really big fight, Caleb. Is this a bigger fight, perhaps, in the States? Is it perceived as a bigger fight in the States than the DeGale fights?
You know, I'm not too sure. As far as locally, it is, because it's a huge fight locally. I mean, Minnesota hasn't had too many big televised shows that are huge opportunities like this for me to put on a show in front of my fans. I fought here on ESPN a few times, but this is a bigger deal. You know, it's going to be an eliminator. Quillin's a former champion, just like myself. And it's going to be a huge night for the state of Minnesota, for boxing in Minnesota, and for me. And it's, you know, they expect a big crowd, probably 6,000 people is what they expect. You know, last time at the fight in August, we had about 4,000, which is I know you guys over there get spoiled with huge Anthony Joshua crowds, but 6,000 in Minnesota is a pretty big crowd. And it will be raucous, and everybody's be screaming my name, and Quillin's going to have to bring his A game, because I'm going to have all my people there, and I'm going to want to show out in front of him.
And Quillin is a bit of a strange story, because I remember picking him to actually beat Daniel Jacobs, and he lost in dramatic fashion, and then he disappeared for what seemed like forever. And of course, since then he's come back, he's had 2 fights, he's won both of them, but both of them he's only won on points. Some people say he's not looked too impressive, and he unexpectedly has given away rounds in both of those mentioned fights. What's your take on Peter Quillin at this stage of his career as a fighter, Caleb?
You know, I'm not too sure, man. I like you said, he was on fire for a while when he was in the middleweight division. Then he lost to Jacobs, and he took, I think it was almost 2 years off, or even over 2 years off, where he was inactive. And he's fought Love in August, I believe it was, and he fought one more fight. And those were his only 2 fights since like December of 2015. So obviously, when you get up in age like he is, I think he's the same as me, a little bit older. I think he's 35 or 36. I think it's really important to be active and stay sharp when you're getting older, and even more so when you're younger, just because you don't want to get complacent, you don't want to get stale, and you want to always be sharp when you're getting older and maybe losing a little speed and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see what he brings to the table. I know he was a big puncher at middleweight. I'm not sure if that will translate up to super middleweight or not, but it'll be interesting. I'm taking it very seriously, and I've actually been in the ring with him before. We've sparred years ago. It was probably 2012 or 2013 when he was getting ready to fight for his world title against Hassan Endam, and after sparring him, I was confident that I could beat him if we ever fought, and I've wanted to fight ever since, frankly. So it's been a while, but here we are.
Wow, well, that seems real promising. It's great to hear that. I didn't know that. I remember your speech after beating James DeGale in the ring. You were very honest. It's what kind of made the UK fans really take to you. And you said that James DeGale was probably a better boxer than you, but you were still able to win the fight. Do you class Quillin as a better boxer than you or not?
No, not at all. I think Quillin's probably a bigger puncher than DeGale. Actually, I know he's a bigger puncher than DeGale because I felt both of them punch, but he's definitely not the boxer or the slick athlete that James DeGale is. He's kind of flat-footed. He explodes on people and has throws big power shots, but I think I'll be able to back him up like I did against DeGale, and he doesn't fight very well on his back foot, just like DeGale didn't. But I don't think his footwork is going to be able to just negate the stuff that I do. So it'll be interesting. I think I match up really well with him, and even better so than with DeGale.
And speaking of James DeGale, he will be taking on Chris Eubank Jr. in an all-British affair in just a few weeks' time. Who wins that one for you? Real interesting. I tell you the opinion over here just before you give yours. A lot of people over here think DeGale's going to win, but there's something, I don't know, there's something in my head that thinks, as you said, he doesn't fight fantastic going backwards anymore. I just think the pressure from Eubank, could really play a big part in the later rounds.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Chris Eubank Jr. Okay. I've seen him fight just 2 or 3 times, I believe, and his fight against Groves, and I saw him fight that Yildirim, and I think maybe when he fought Billy Joe Sanders, I think. But yeah, so I'm not too familiar, but I mean, he's athletic. He looks to be fairly powerful, and he's in good shape. I'd say that. He comes and he throws power shots the whole time. I don't think he has too much power, but he keeps on throwing them, and we'll just see how his boxing ability stacks up to DeGale's, because against George Groves, he looked completely outclassed. He just didn't have any answers for any type of boxing that Groves was putting on him. So you can only go so far with that athleticism and explosive power. When you fight those top world level guys, you have to be able to box a little bit too. And I hear that he finally hired a trainer to show him a thing or two instead of just going in there and throwing power shots. But we'll see how he reacts to DeGale's movement and just experience.
It'd be very interesting. It really will be. And finally, Caleb, I just wanted to ask you about this.
I didn't give you a prediction though. Let me backtrack. I think if DeGale is if he hasn't suffered from the 2 fights with me and that fight with the Badu Jack where he still has some left in the tank, I think he'll win. And if it's noticeable that those 3 fights, 3 tough fights in a row took a toll on him, then I think Eubank will probably be fresher and be able to back him up and just probably pressure him and maybe even stop him. Who knows? But I think I see it going one of the 2 ways. Either DeGale outboxes him and uses his experience and skills, or Eubank just pressures him and takes advantage of a DeGale that's been in some tough wars.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% word for word. And finally, Caleb, I just wanted to ask you about this new cabin that you've bought now. I've seen some interesting videos. It looks really exciting. You've got like a lake right behind this cabin, and I know you're a real keen fisherman when you're not boxing. Tell us about it. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's always been a dream of mine to have a lake cabin. I grew up fishing in Minnesota. It's a huge deal to get to the lake and enjoy yourself in the summers. Well, right now it's like minus 50 degrees, so it's no fishing unless you're ice fishing right now. But no, it was really cool to be able to kind of enjoy the fruits of my labor in those DeGale fights and have enough money to buy a cabin. And it's actually my girlfriend's family cabin, so I was able to keep it in the family and kind of pass on some of the memories that she had and her family had to my kids, and just enjoy it, hopefully as a retirement home someday.
Excellent stuff. Just when I thought that you couldn't love Caleb Truax even more, he pulls that one out of the hat. Caleb, listen, I won't take up any more of your time, my friend. Best of luck for April 13th. We'll be right behind you in that one, and we hope to catch up sometime after, my friend.
Absolutely, man. Give me a holler.
Okay, now it's time for part 2 on this week's show. This part, of course, the news part of the show. Ayaz, what have you got?
The only news is that George Groves has announced his retirement from boxing.
Yes. A great career he had, really, Ayaz, when you think about it. Obviously, a man that didn't make it to the Olympics, a man that obviously held that win in the amateurs over his long-term rival, James DeGale. When he turned pro, when you look back at it, I think the pair probably fought a little bit early on. I mean, they were two undefeated prospects that, of course, went on to achieve world titles, each of them. And, they fought early on in their careers, a real close fight that went George Groves' way. And after that, for a long time, it kind of seemed like, George Groves got all this kind of attention for a long time, and then all of a sudden James DeGale picked up a world title. And don't get me wrong, George Groves, he picked up a world title himself, but he had those big nights before that against Froch, especially the first one where, it all ended in controversy and all the rest of it. His time under the likes of Adam Booth, his time where he was really close to David Haye. He's had some monster nights, and obviously none will top that night, the rematch against Froch, where of course he made a shed load of money, but aside from that, it was a brilliant fight, despite the way it ended. Obviously it ended in sadness for him. And then he got that crack against Chudanov. He had that good fight with Badu Jack, remember. He's been in many big fights, and obviously to lose to Callum Smith out there in Saudi Arabia in the World Boxing Super Series final was a bit of a sad way to end his career. But what I do like about the whole thing is that he's waited quite a while to announce this retirement. It wasn't a thing where he just lost and was quite upset about it and just decided to retire. He's had a long time to think about this, and he's made the decision. And let's be honest, he could have fought James DeGale. I'm a little bit sad that the rematch never did happen, and it never will happen. But he really could have fought the winner, or perhaps the loser, of DeGale and Eubank. He could have hung around for that, but he didn't. So a little bit of me is a bit sad about that. But, he gets out, he makes the choice on his own terms, and fair play to him. I don't think he could have picked up another world title, if I'm being honest. So why hang around just for the money? Some people box purely for money, but I think George made enough of it for that no longer to really be his main concentration. I think his main motivation ended up being the legacy stuff. And like I say, he was involved in a lot of legacy fights. But yeah, a great career. And, it's sad to see one of our biggest names in British boxing hang the gloves up once again. But a brilliant career he had, Ayaz. I'm sure you got right behind him many times.
I mean, we all remember that night when he fought Carl Froch, obviously at Manchester, and then obviously when he famously dropped Carl Froch. We all remember when he accomplished his dream, winning the world title. We remember the fight with Badu Jack. He fought Vegas, lost to Vegas. People thought he was finished. He came back, linked up with Shane McGuigan, and won the world titles. But I mean, George Groves had a great career, and I'll give him credit. I mean, he's had a marvelous career. But I would still like to see the DeGale rematch. But I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's for best for what Groves does.
Yeah, well said, Ayaz. And funny enough, I remember I've actually got a boxing glove that George Groves signed for me at one point. I think it was maybe in Westfield Shopping Centre, something like that. I think it was either before, I think it was the before the rematch. And anyway, years later, I say years, probably a year or two after the fight, that was when I gave you that glove, Ayaz, and told you to go in the press room and get it signed by Carl Froch. And obviously there's not many people out there that have got a dual signed glove by George Groves and Carl Froch, the two men that were the first to sell out an 80,000 capacity arena at Wembley. So amazing stuff there, and like I say, a great career he's had to look back on. Let's start though here with the preview part of the show. We talked about the news for quite a bit there. We're going to start in Japan at the Korakuen Hall in Tokyo. One fight to mention: former IBF super featherweight, is it super featherweight? Yeah, I think it's super featherweight world champion Kenichi Ogawa. That's the guy that actually beat Tevin Farmer, and it was really controversial, that decision. But then, of course, he failed a drugs test, he got stripped, and we know what happened there. Ogawa, I think, went back to Japan, perhaps had one fight in the meantime. I could be wrong, but anyway, it's been a long time since he's fought. I think, like I say, maybe the one fight. Maybe he hasn't fought since Tevin Farmer, since that fight there with Tevin Farmer. I'll have to look into that. But I will say, Ogawa, still a big name. 22-1. He takes on Roldan Adea, 12-6 with one draw, a 10-rounder there. Moving out now to the O2 Arena in Greenwich, London, United Kingdom, Ayaz. We're going to start with the undercard. The debut of Charles Frankham, a real good amateur. We talked about him. It's his first professional fight here. Like I say, obviously he's with Matchroom, a brilliant amateur. Like I say, travelled all over the place for sparring. He's really sparred some world-class guys. And his opponent's yet to be announced. That's a 4-rounder there. Also, we've got Scott Fitzgerald, 11-0. He's in a 6-rounder against Filip Radazek, who has a record of 2-11. Obviously, Scott Fitzgerald penciled in to take on Anthony Fowler on that Liverpool show in March, so this is a little bit of a run out for him before that fight. Also on this bill we have Jake Bull, 12-1, taking on Craig Richards, 13-1. This one's for the vacant WBA Continental Light Heavyweight title. It's been scheduled, this fight, 2, 3 or 4 times. I always forget. Obviously both men friends of the show. Craig Richards has been on talking about this fight in the build-up, so has Jake Bull when it was originally scheduled. But yeah, I didn't really see the point of getting either guy on once again to pretty much talk about the same fight, so I'm sure we'll catch up with the winner after that fight does eventually take place. But a brilliant fight. Has a bit of a grudge match as well, and it's true grudge. It really is.
It's a true grudge fight, and I think it's going to be a very entertaining fight. But if I'm going to go with a win, I'm going to go with Jake Bull, because I think Jake Bull's, I think he's done incredibly well linking up with Dominic Ingle, and I think he's got a great base around him. He's got a great trainer with Dominic Ingle, and I think Dominic Ingle's put him in brilliant shape. So I'm going to go with a win. I want to go with Jake Bull to win by points.
Yeah, do you know what? I mean, I think no one can argue that the attributes are with Jake Bull. Jake Bull being a 6'4" southpaw. I mean, that that just says it all, really. But of course, you can't sleep on Craig Richards, 6'1", orthodox fighter. Obviously, hasn't really had tons of great wins at light heavyweight yet. That one big fight he had on about 4 or 5 days' notice against Frank Buglioni wasn't great, and it speaks for itself why it wasn't great. He wasn't given a proper camp. He'd only moved up in weight that week. It was all wrong for him there. He was in there to lose, and that is what it is. But yeah, he went the distance with Frank Buglioni, and he showed his toughness that night. So Jake Bull, I mean, one of his main strengths, he's a big puncher. So it is a funny kind of fight. I mean, it could really go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if Jake Bull was to get the stoppage. I wouldn't be surprised if Craig Richards got a late stoppage. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to points and either man got the nod. It really could go either way. And for that reason, I'm not going to give a prediction here. I'm going to actually very unusually sit on the fence. I do like both guys, and I wouldn't want to upset either of them, but a brilliant fight. I'm really looking forward to it, actually, which is unusual because most of the time when two good friends are fighting, I don't really like to see the fight, but I'm actually really looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be a good fight, and like I say, I think the styles will clash and gel together, and it will be a good watch. One thing that Craig Richards has told me is that he's punching a lot harder up at light heavyweight. He's a lot more comfortable making the weight, and he was killing himself to get down to 168 before. So yeah, all the very best to Craig Richards, and like I say, all the very best to Jake Bull. Great fight. Also on the bill, we will see Felix Cash, 10-0, take on Rashid Abolaji. His record 11-4 with one draw. It's for the vacant Commonwealth middleweight title. I'm expecting Felix Cash to to probably even get a stoppage there against that guy. And topping the bill, Sergio Garcia Ayaz, 28-0, a Spanish fighter, obviously being managed and promoted, if I'm not mistaken, by Sergio Martinez, the former middleweight king. This one's for his EBU European Super Welterweight title. In the other corner, our very own Ted Cheeseman, 15-0. Very impressive Ted Cheeseman has been. Since turning pro, he's come through a few gut checks. He's had some big tests, the likes of Carson Jones, last time out against Asinia Byfield. He's come through those tests and he's looked a solid fighter. He's very, very strong, Ted Cheeseman. This is a big fight for him, though. It's arguably his toughest fight of his career. I think it probably is his toughest fight of his career, to be honest. Obviously, for a European title, the winner will go on to big things, but we can't overlook this guy here. He's never lost, and one thing Craig Richards told me when he was sat at the top table right next to Sergio Garcia, he said to me, do you know what, I looked in his face and I could tell, I just looked at him and he looked like a fighter. And some people will say, well, what does that mean? I understood exactly what he meant by that. He looks like a fighter. He's not just in boxing for what it is, and he's taking each fight lightly. He's not fighting good opposition. He's not sparring hard. He looked like a fighter, and I understood that completely when Craig Richards said that. So a good fight, and certainly not a given, Ayaz. I'm interested to know what the odds are going to be, but certainly not a given. Very tough fight for Ted Cheeseman here.
Yeah, I mean, Sergio Garcia is obviously a good fighter, and so is Ted Cheeseman. I mean, this is going to be a very, very tough fight for Ted Cheeseman. But if I'm going to go with a win, I'm going to go with Sergio Garcia to knock Ted Cheeseman out.
Really, Ayaz? Wow. Okay. That is a statement. We have gone to the prediction league on that one. That goes to show how tough of a fight you see this. The listeners have gone with Cheeseman by knockout. I'm not quite sure that's going to happen. I think I'm going to go with Cheeseman on points. I think the judges may even be doing him a little bit of a favour. I hope there's no controversy. I hope the right man does get the victory. But for me, it's going to be Cheeseman on points. But interesting to see that yourself and the listeners have both gone with knockout wins. And you've been on form, Ayaz. Moving out now to the Holt Suite in Villa Park, Birmingham, West Midlands, United Kingdom. One fight to mention over here, not quite sure if it's still going ahead, but it is listed. Sam Eggington, 23-5. His opponent yet to be announced. Obviously, he's penciled in to take on Liam Smith in March on that Liverpool bill that we mentioned, so not quite sure if he will be fighting, but if he will, then it better be against someone who is a real journeyman, not a Hassan Mwakinyo type journeyman where it could all go wrong for him. He is topping the bill, but when you look at that, by the way, I know people are saying it's a great fight, Eggington and Liam Smith, but I mean, both men are coming off losses and they're topping a bill and people are praising that bill. For me, I'm not overly looking forward to that fight. Moving out now to the Ford Center at the Star in Frisco, Texas, USA. The final bill to mention, let's start with the undercard here. Teofimo Lopez, the highly touted prospect, 11-0. He puts his NABF lightweight title on the line against Diego Magdaleno, a man that we saw in there with Terry Flanagan some years back, 31-2. I think Flanagan took him out in 2 rounds, which was really, really, really impressive. It just goes to show what they think of Teofimo Lopez, to stick him in with Diego Magdaleno, a former world title challenger, this early in his career. It'll be interesting to see if he can do a job on Diego Magdaleno. Also on the bill, the return of Oscar Valdez Ayaz. It's good to see him back. I don't think he's fought since the Quigg fight, which was a war, despite him winning quite handily. 24-0 Valdez. It's for his WBO world featherweight title. He takes on the Italian Carmine Tomasone, 19-0. Bit of a padded record, to be honest, which we see time and time again from the Italians. I'm expecting a Valdez knockout there. Also on the bill, Richard Commey, 27-2. Been very, very unlucky recently, Commey. I think he's had a few tight decisions go against him. I think his 2 losses have both been split decisions, if I'm not mistaken. But he gets a chance here to finally pick up a world title. It's for the vacant IBF World Lightweight crown. He takes on Russia's Issa Shenayev, who's 13-1. Good fight, though, by the way. I'm expecting Commey to probably get the knockout there, though. I think it's his time. It really is. I know he's a hungry fighter. And topping the bill, the rematch, Alida Alvarez Ayaz, 24-0. He puts his WBO light heavyweight title on the line against former world champion himself, former holder of the belt, Sergey Kovalev, 32-3 with one draw. Obviously, in the original fight, there was a rematch clause, and everyone was speculating whether or not Kovalev would exercise that rematch clause, and he showed that he was not going to back down from this second chance for him. He wants the fight, and it's an intriguing fight once again. How do you see it playing out? Interesting one.
I mean, I think for me personally, I think it's going to be similar to the first one. I think what it's basically, since Kovalev's fought those two Andre Ward fights, I think it has taken out a lot out of him. And obviously, Alvarez is a newer, fresher guy. So in my opinion, I think Alvarez is going to stop him. But I think he's going to stop him quicker.
Okay, because in the first fight, obviously, Sergey Kovalev was leading on points. I mean, he was winning the fight quite clearly until he kind of walked onto one. And, of course, he was down 3 times in that 7th round, and he seemed like he just didn't know how to recover. And it was sad to see him get stopped like that, to be completely honest. But, yeah, he was leading on all 3 cards at the time of the stoppage in that 7th round. And I think the question mark is, what is Kovalev going to be like in the later rounds? Because he seemed to slow down a little bit. But, yeah, good shot from Alvarez at the time. I'm not taking that away from him, but Alvarez himself's not even really known as a big puncher. He's got a 50% KO ratio, so it was quite a big upset at the time. Credit to Kovalev, like I say, for taking the rematch. Many people thought he was done, and if he can win this fight, then of course he's right back at the top of the division, really. I mean, let's be honest, he was known as the killer. As soon as Andre Ward retired, he was the best guy. I mean, Bivol was coming through, Beterbiev was still coming through, Adonis Stevenson, of course, didn't want no part of Kovalev, and now he's not going to box again, so he's completely out the picture. So yeah, it will be interesting, but again, if he wins, then it's all Russians, if I'm not mistaken, holding world titles. It's Beterbiev with the IBF, Bivol with the WBA, Kovalev would pick up the WBO, and the WBC now is Gvozdyk. Oh, sorry, not a Russian. He's, of course, Ukrainian. But, yeah, very much an Eastern European division, light heavyweight. But, yeah, a great fight. I'm going to say... So you're going with Alvarez by knockout, Ayaz. Is that what you're going with?
Correct, in the earlier rounds.
Okay, and the listeners have gone with, let's just confirm, they've gone with Alvarez by knockout also. I'm going to go with Kovalev by knockout. I mean, I think it is a bit of a big ask. You mentioned there about Andre Ward kind of taking it out of Kovalev. I think you're right to some degree. I mean, he knocked out Shabransky in 2 rounds after that Andre Ward loss. It was only 5 months later when he fought Shabransky, but Shabransky wasn't a fantastic opponent. And then obviously he got in there with Igor McCorkin, and he seemed to struggle with McCorkin for a while. I mean, he won everything and he knocked him out in the 7th, but he really had trouble pinning him down and hurting him. His power didn't really seem to have that crack that we're used to seeing, and of course he couldn't really hurt Alvarez, so it's going to be interesting. But I think Kovalev would have trained a lot harder. This is a must-win fight. If he loses, he retires. It's as simple as that. I'm guessing he's going to probably do that, so it's a must-win for him, and it's really the first time he's been in a proper must-win fight. I know that the Andre Ward fight was a bit of a must-win, but that was a tough, tall ask, and I think Alida Alvarez is no Andre Ward, so it's very much a much more winnable fight than the Ward fight. And like I say, in the first fight, he was winning it, and everyone could see that. So I think he just needs to not get caught. He needs to not fade late on. So I hope he's been training hard, and I think he probably will get the stoppage this time round. It's going to be interesting because I think when he knows that he needs a win, I think he fights a little bit better, and he's gutsy. I don't think you can say that he's a bottle job or nothing like that. I think Kovalev knows when he's got to finish someone, he will go for it. So it'd be interesting to see him go for broke if he needs to, because he does need a win here. But that's about it for the preview part of the show. Like I say, we've brought you guest 1, we brought you the review part, we brought you the preview part. Ayaz brought you the news on George Groves retiring. And just before we wrap up the show entirely, the last thing to do is to welcome our second and final guest. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the undefeated heavyweight contender himself. It is, of course, Mr. Adam Kownacki. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, Adam, you obviously started boxing when you were age 16, if I'm not mistaken. You were a big Andrew Golota fan back then growing up, right?
Yeah, that's correct. My first amateur fight was at 16, I think.
Okay. And of course, you turned pro. By 2010, you were 4-0 with 4 knockouts. And then you spent almost 3 years outside of the ring. For those that don't know, what actually happened for that to occur, Adam?
I broke my hand. I had a fracture in my second metacarpal, and it didn't heal right, so I needed another surgery. So it took a while to heal.
Man, it must have been a bit of a frustrating time because you hadn't really got going yet. It must have been pretty annoying for that to happen so early on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was definitely a step back, but I believe everything happens for a reason. So it happened for a reason, and I matured a lot during that time, and I think it also helped me develop as a human being.
Excellent. And your breakout win, in my opinion, has to be the Artur Szpilka win. I remember being quite shocked, if I'm honest. I mean, you battered him over 4 rounds back in July 2017. Would you agree that was probably the fight that catapulted you into worldwide recognition?
Yeah, definitely. I think nobody thought I was going to do it the way I did it. Like, a lot of people thought he would outbox me, especially following his performance against Wilder, which wasn't that bad until he got caught with that good right hand, So I think they did a good job.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was probably winning the Wilder fight, to be honest, until he got caught with that humongous right hand. Since then, you fought good opponent after good opponent. You knocked out Kiladze, then you fought Charles Martin. The Charles Martin fight was a good fight. I remember watching it live. It ended up going the distance. You started very well, but Charles Martin seemed to have a lot of success in the later rounds. How would you assess that performance from yourself?
I think I had 2 rounds, the 7th and 8th, where I took the gas off the pedal a little bit. Okay. But I came back strong in the 9th and 10th round. I almost had him out in the 10th round until he held onto the ropes very well. So, but yeah, like you said, I think I took 2 rounds off and let him sneak back into it a little bit.
Yeah, a great fight. Like I say, a great finishing round there in the 12th. And then, of course, came your most recent win, a win on the weekend, just gone over Gerald Washington. Once again, I actually felt that if Gerald was able to use his size, his jab, his distance, he could possibly cause you problems. But once again, you absolutely demolished your opponent. I mean, in that first round, you were hitting him way too often. And I just thought to myself, wow, he cannot keep taking these shots. And, of course, the very next round, you were able to get him out of there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was the Szpilka fight boosted me to being a no name like that. I think just made me a huge name. I think I proved that I'm a top ranked heavyweight, and I'm on my way to get a title shot, and hopefully win it.
And like I say, you had a perfect first round. You was able to hit Gerald way too easily. He had no answer for your hooks. Your speed seemed to really stun him and surprise him. It was a nightmare start for Gerald. You really put your foot on the gas after he came out in the second round, because he came out and he threw a nice eye-catching combination, but that seemed to kind of anger you, if anything, and you really went for it, and that was, of course, where you stopped him. Yeah, I mean, did that little combo kind of get you mad?
It got me happy. I mean, if anybody boxes, I was like, oh, he's on. That's like a sprint. So when you sprint real quick, it takes you a while to get back, to recover. So once he threw that combo, I was like, oh, he's gonna get gassed a little bit after that. So I knew that was my opening to throw my combination and go after him more. And I was able to do that and finish him off.
You certainly did. And just after the fight, you took hold of the microphone and you let everyone know about this fantastic announcement. You told everyone to shush, and you're going to be a father. So fantastic stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like a movie. So waiting for the ending, Hopefully this year I get a title shot and become the first Polish heavyweight champion of the world.
And of course, this is further motivation for you. When's the baby due? You got a due date right now?
August.
Oh,
yeah,
brilliant.
August. Yeah.
Brilliant, man. And do you know just yet what's next for you, Adam? I know that it's still very early. We're only a few days after the fight, but do you know when you're going to be fighting next at all just yet?
Not yet. I'm still just relaxing a little bit, enjoying myself, doing some cardio, so not to get too big. And just enjoying the life right now, doing a lot of PR stuff, a lot of interviews, and just enjoying the ride.
And a man that was observing in the crowd, Deontay Wilder, like I say, you were able to get Gerald Washington out of there in less than half the time Wilder needed. Out of Wilder and Anthony Joshua, the two heavyweight champions right now, I know that you're ranked in two major organisations. Which fight out of those two is more appealing to you in your style?
I think my style is tough for any fighter. The pressure is hard to keep me off you guys, them guys. I love both fights. I want to be the first Polish heavyweight champion of the world. That's my goal. And whoever has the belt, that's who I want to fight.
And
or three belts, I should say.
Yeah, of course. And if the Wilder Fury rematch should happen, who do you see coming out victorious? Who did you have winning the first fight as well?
The first fight, I think Fury was a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
But the two knockdowns, I could have seen it a draw, but I definitely had Fury more ahead. And then there were like a couple close rounds that could have went to Wilder, so I could see how it could have been a draw, but definitely Fury boxed much better than Wilder, I thought.
And who do you reckon would win the rematch if it does happen, like we all hope it will?
I don't know. Wilder's proved that he could crack him, So if he lands more of those crazy power shots, it might end early, But you never know. If Fury shows up in great defense like he had, he could give another boxing lesson. So I think it's an amazing fight, a great fight. I hope it happens.
And we're still unclear about who Anthony Joshua is going to fight next. We're hearing, April the 13th. That's been the date for a long time. It's still so unclear. There's three main candidates, I guess, or four. Wilder, Fury. I doubt it's going to be those two. It looks like it's going to be either Dillian Whyte or perhaps Big Baby Miller. Who would you like to see get the shot if it could be any of those four?
I think everybody wants to see Wilder versus Joshua to have like one unified champion. But like you said, that will happen. So next time, I hope it's my good friend Big Baby Miller. I hope he gets that shot.
I think that's a good fight. Stylistically, I like that better than the Dillian Whyte fight, and I think that it could be very interesting in the later rounds. The pace that Gerald can set. I think he's very tough, obviously, and I think in those later rounds when he's putting the pressure on Joshua, that could be really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Hope it happens, And they talking about maybe bringing it to MSG, which would be great too.
It certainly would. And finally, my last question to you, Adam. I like to ask this question to everybody that we speak to from overseas. Who would you say, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, who would you say is your favourite UK fighter of all time? It can be a guy that's still fighting now. It can be a guy that's retired years ago. Any era.
Let's see. Yeah, a lot of great fighters. Joe Kownacki was great. Ricky Hatton was a great fighter too. I think I had to go with Joe Kownacki. I think he was amazing.
Yeah, very popular answer. And finally, like I say, have you got any kind of message for your UK fans over here, Adam? Like I say, a lot of people are really getting behind you now, recognising the talent that you've got. What's your message to your fans from over here?
Keep a lookout. Hopefully, maybe you see me in the Wembley one day. And there's also a big population in the UK, so I would love to fight there one day.
And there is so many Polish fans over here that have come out for you, I'm sure of that. Where can people follow you on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all the rest of it if they're not already following Adam?
So my Facebook is Adam Kownacki, and then the Instagram and Twitter is AK Babyface. AK
Babyface, perfect. Right, listen, Adam, I'd like to just thank you for coming on the podcast this week. Thank you for your time. Congrats once again on your win and the fact that you're going to soon become a father, and we'll catch up sometime in the near future.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Okay, and this wraps up episode 172 of the BoxHard Podcast. We've finally fixed the audio issues from last week. Thank God for that. It was really worrying me that we wouldn't sort the audio in time, so thankfully that has been done. I've been your host, Joey Coastman. Ayaz Summer has been his usual self. A big thank you to our two guests on this week's show, the former IBF Super-Middleweight World Champion, Caleb Truax, and the undefeated heavyweight contender, Mr. Adam Kownacki. There has been some other other news that's broken since we've been recording this show, Abner Mares has pulled out of his showdown against Gervonta Davis next weekend. That's real sad. But in steps Hugo Ruiz, a late replacement, a man that's really a featherweight, so he's moving up in weight for this. And he also fought on the Pacquiao-Broner undercard just a matter of days ago, and he went 10 rounds on that card. So in my opinion, this is quite dangerous, to be honest, but that's just my opinion. Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing have signed Srisakat Sorungvasai, also known as a couple of other things, especially on this show. We know that he loves an unseasoned rodent. They've signed him to their stable. His next fight will take place on DAZN and on Sky Sports. That's going to be getting announced very shortly, after a weird announcement that Ivan Baranchyk would be pulling out of the World Boxing Super Series tournament. Just today, Thursday, the series themselves tweeted out and announced that Baranchyk will actually be fighting Josh Taylor, and it will happen on May the 18th at the Hydro in Glasgow. So make of that what you will. Seems a bit strange to me. The prediction league currently stands at myself in the lead on 85 points, and Ayaz and you, the listeners, are tied on 80 points. Best of luck with the predictions this week. The winner of the hashtag Completed It Mate competition is at TubaTJ, so please send us your address either via Instagram or Twitter along with your t-shirt size. Please, guys, remember to leave us a review on iTunes if you have got any spare time. It really does mean a lot. The best review on iTunes that's left on there will also receive a BoxHard Podcast t-shirt. But that's about it from myself and Ayaz. Enjoy your weekends, people. Stay safe, and we shall see you all again next week.